Hey there and welcome to Jeep Sheep TV. This week we're going to talk about Iridium spark plugs and the benefits of installing them.
Alright. This rubber seal. Don't forget this. You need these. Them in a star pattern.
Hey, is your engine running rough? Is the gas mileage a little low? Is your throttle response nothing to be desired? Well, if that's so, then you might have a 4-cylinder Jeep. Wait, no. If that's so, then you might... Maybe it's bad spark plugs. I don't know. Or it could be a number of other things. But today we're going to talk about spark plugs. Spark plugs are pretty important, and there's a couple of variations, but essentially they're all very, very similar. A lot of electricity goes into one end, and there's another end over here. You get that built-up charge, and it jumps across. Well, that jump, that's called a spark. The spark is really freaking hot, and gasoline seems to like things that are really freaking hot, so much so that it explodes. And that's simple chemistry, I guess. All right, well, today what we're doing is we're taking out my old copper spark plugs and we're putting in iridium spark plugs. Now, I'm not really a materials scientist. I am an engineer, so I can understand these concepts, but probably not regurgitate them off the top of my head. Now, I do have a friend who runs the Bread to Loaf channel, and he is a chemist of sorts. So maybe he can give us some insight as to why iridium is better than copper for use in your engine. So I'm going to pass the mic to him.
Thanks, Jeep Sheep. I'll take it from here. Welcome, Internet. Are you ready for some chemistry? Today, on this short Bread to Loaf segment, we go over the chemistry of iridium spark plugs. Now remember, chem is try. So I will try to explain the chemistry behind iridium spark plugs. So let's get right into it. Spark plugs in a gasoline engine are what ignite the fuel-air mixture in your combustion chamber. Now the real magic happens right here at the tip. Just the tip. Here is where a high voltage spark jumps across the gap between this post and this electrode. Now, of course, there are a few different metals you can choose from to make up your spark plug tips. Copper being one of them right here. And of course, we have iridium right here. Now, what makes an iridium spark plug better than a copper spark plug, in my humble opinion? Well, the name of the game is durability. And guess what? It turns out iridium atomic element number 77 is one tough mother. Turns out, exhaust gas on the power stroke of a gasoline engine are toasty, like 1100 degrees Fahrenheit toasty. That's 600 degrees Celsius for you people who don't use freedom units. Don't worry, iridium's got you covered. With a melting point of 4,435 degrees Fahrenheit or 2,446 degrees Celsius, the metal of your engine block will literally melt before the tip of this iridium spark plug does. Iridium is right up there with tungsten and other extremely dense, extremely high melting point metals that make it perfect for being spark plug. Compare that with copper with a melting point of only 1,984 degrees Fahrenheit or around 1,000 degrees Celsius, and you get the picture. And another thing about iridium is it's hard. How hard, you ask? Harder than me when I'm at ladies' night at the local bar. Iridium scores high on the Mohs scale and is the most corrosion-resistant metal known to man, meaning it can take those zaps all day and keep on trucking. Copper, on the other hand, being the soft, malleable, pussy metal that it is, it can only take a few zaps before it gets deformed, cracked, and that's why manufacturers recommend you only use copper spark plugs for about 20,000 to 40,000 miles. Iridium, on the other hand, can last 75,000, 80,000, 100,000, even 120,000 miles before you need to change these bad boys. Iridium is tough, durable, resistant to electric arc. It can take that heat. That's why iridium is a perfect choice for use in a spark plug. Hope you all enjoyed this lesson on iridium spark plugs and the chemistry behind them. If you didn't, back to you, Jeep Sheep.
All right, and welcome back. I hope that was at least 1% informative for you. So maybe not so fortunate, but lucky for demonstration's sake, before doing this conversion to iridium spark plugs, my engine started to misfire quite a bit, so at low RPM, sitting at stoplights and stuff like that. And this was happening right before I swapped in my injectors And I was thinking, hey, maybe the injectors are part of the misfire issue. We swapped in the injectors. Please watch that video. Please watch that video. Please watch that video. Anyway, we swapped in the injectors and the misfire remained. So if you think about it with me, you have air coming in. At one point, fuel gets mixed with that air. Okay, all in good. That's our injectors. All right. That comes into the cylinder. The cylinder then compresses this. So you gotta have a nice tight seal in there of some kind. And then with it all compressed in there, you've got a hot spark that then ignites this, which explodes, and that's how your engine works. That's where power comes from. So we checked that fuel coming into the air. Cool. Air getting into the cylinder, we're assuming that's happening because it's still running. Okay. All right, so we're assuming air gets into the cylinder and it's going to compress. I'm not going to really confidently say that that happens super well in this engine, but let's say it compresses. Now what is left? We've got that spark. So anyway, we threw in my Iridium spark plugs and voila, the misfire is gone. Now, there was one thing that I discovered that may have contributed to that misfire, and it was that in removing the old spark plugs, a couple of them were, let's just say, loose. They were a little wiggly or not tightened down all the way, which, let's just say the previous mechanic, who shall remain unnamed, may or may not have done a very good job. Yeah. So anyway, the spark plugs being loose, rattling around, could contribute to a loss in, you guessed it, compression. So we could be looking at a couple of different issues here. Fortunately, when reinstalling the Iridium spark plugs, I did what all mechanics should always do, which is use a torque wrench and torque to spec. I'm going to throw the number on the screen here because I can't remember off the top of my head. But torque spec, super important. Do that. Okay, we throw spark plugs into the engine, torque them down, plug them in, and what happened? Well, I will tell you. Okay, so I'm going to throw the weather up here. This first one is from the fuel injector. Please watch that video. Test. And that video explains the parameters of the test and how I'm doing it. But the weather from that day, it was 16 degrees with a 60% humidity and 10 to 15 miles per hour southwest is the wind speed. And what we did that day was we drove from 45 miles an hour to 60 miles an hour, which is roughly third gear in this Jeep. It's a 1-to-1 ratio, and so it's just the engine. It's not a real 0 to 60 test because obviously the transmission plays into that, but we're going with just engine here, and that took us 49.5 seconds with the new injectors or prior to the spark plugs. Yay! Okay, and for gas mileage, we achieved 15.52, which is okay for this Jeep. All right, now, after installing the spark plugs, we did that exact same test. I'm not going to bore you with the in-cabin view, but I will tell you that the 45 to 60 improved. And before I get to that, let me throw the weather up here so that way we're consistent right there. That was 12 degrees Fahrenheit, 50% humidity, and 5 to 10 miles per hour north-northeast. So it's a little bit colder, and the wind was a little bit less. Those are both contributing factors, but our 45 to 60 took us 45 seconds instead of 49.5, which gives us 4.5 seconds of a better time. I think that's significant. I also noticed that my throttle response seems to be a little bit better now that I've done both of these modifications, and the Jeep is indeed more fun to drive. However, it's not even remotely fast or fuel efficient. Speaking of fuel efficiency, adding the Iridium spark plugs I have no idea what it did. I was messing with my transmission kickdown cable. I have a feeling that it's locking the torque converter, and then I ran out of time and the weather was bad, and I drove to work and I drove here and there. I got a range of anything from 9 miles per gallon to 12. So if we were to go off that data, the Iridium spark plugs made my MPGs worse, which is not consistent at all with any other studies of Iridium spark plugs. That honestly, I don't know if it just got really windy or what, but that's all I can tell you about that. Now, everyone else swears by them. I like them. They weren't egregiously expensive, and so here you go. This is a YouTube channel, and we are trying to gain a community because there's stuff that we want to do with you guys. For example, we're going to Moab, Utah this Easter for the Easter Jeep Safari, and I would love if everyone and their mother could tune into our channel and see what we're doing. It's going to be mostly tailored to people who don't have big rock crawling rigs. They have Jeeps like mine. They daily drive them, and they think I could never go to Moab because it's too risky and it's too dangerous and the trails are too crazy and I need to put $20 million in my Jeep. Well, we're going to take this guy out there. I'm doing some modifications just for myself, but in all reality, I'm told we can take a stock Jeep out there and have just as much fun as the rock crawling guys. So we're going to demonstrate that for you this year. And we're also driving across the country in an old Jeep, so there's nothing that could go wrong. Right. This has been a short video, but hopefully informative for you. Just go ahead and hit that subscribe down below, as well as the little bell, so that way you know when more videos are coming out. We're tearing out this engine here pretty soon, so you're gonna want to stay notified. Alright, thanks. See you on the trail.
Me too, and I'm confident that she'll think so too. And she'll be coming back, coming back, coming back.